Hey everyone, we're going to give everybody a minute just to come on in and get settled. In the meantime, we've got a little poll question here that we've put up. It's funny. So Frank and Scott, you and I were earlier talking about 80s movies and how each of us is a fan. I myself, am a huge fan of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, that being one of the first rated R movies that I ever saw. Always a good time there.
Yeah, that one never gets old. I've seen it probably 10 times, and I can still laugh as if it's a brand new joke. You know, John Candy and Steve Martin are brilliant together. I actually have, there's like basically every John Hughes movie I like, but right here I have Bull Durham, which is one of my favorites. And one reason why I like it is because if you're just a baseball junkie, it's maybe one of your top 10 movies. If you're not a baseball junkie and you just like a good story, you can still fall in love with it. So that's why it's back on my board, because I'm both, as you can see from the baseball and then my love for movies. Frank, what do you got?
More lighthearted baseball film that I really like, Major League.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Pretty good one when I was a kid.
Throw those fastballs. I mean, Bull Durham, it's funny, the whole phrasing, if you build it and they will come, right?
That's Field of Dreams. That's Field of Dreams.
Oh, right.
Kevin Costner.
Right. Okay. Different, same genre though,
yep.
Right? But all those 80s movies, there's always things that kind of persist, if you will, throughout time, if you will. All right, why don't we get started? Awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is Nipul Choksi. I run marketing at Atrium, and I've got the good fortune of being kind of the opening act and the moderator for these gentlemen here. Today's event, next slide, is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And in case you aren't aware, MSP, or the Modern Sales Pros, we are the largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue ops, sales development, and all those supporting disciplines. Our mission is to really create an environment for our 20K and strong and growing members to answer questions that they struggle to solve on their own, and to help see around corners that they may not know about. If you like the content that we're going to cover, you'll love our upcoming Revenue Excellence Summit happening October 12th through the 14th, where we're going to be talking about people, processes, and technologies needed to get ready for 2022. But enough about MSP. Today's session wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship from the team at Chronologic. I'm going to hand it off to Scott Logan to say a few words about Chronologic. Scott?
Yeah, thanks. So at Chronologic, our overall motto is we turn time into value. But what that means for sales professionals and marketing professionals and customer success professionals, which we'll talk about the cross section today, is that we essentially automate the sending of calendar invites as the first touch point for sales follow-up. So when you have a qualified lead, an MQL, a customer who's ready for an upsell or a cross-sell, you know there's intent, you know they're the right person from the right company, you go ahead and prompt them with a calendar invite that's timely and tailored. And in that context, you can then increase your conversion rates to the likes of which you're not used to, and can help hit your goals faster.
Awesome, great, so great to have you here. So today we're going to be talking about 4 ways to crush your end of year goals with cross-selling and upselling. And Scott and Frank are great experts on the topic. Before we get started, I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves. And let's start with you, Frank.
Yeah, thanks, Nipul. I am the head of customer marketing at Chronologic. So a little bit of what we brought to share today, we'll be talking about best practices and wisdom in converting leads to valuable meetings. Some of that's coming directly from working with our customers. And that's my mission there. I'm really passionate about figuring out what works as we go in this business based on what's working for customers.
Yeah, that's great, Frank. And I run marketing. You didn't say it, but one of my favorite things about Frank in this role is not only does he know marketing and know sales, but he's actually ran account management teams, both at ChronoLogic and other places as well. So truly understanding the customer side of things. And then myself, been involved in demand gen teams ever since like 2008, and was a sales rep carrying a bag before that for a handful of years for a couple different companies. So I understand the marketing and sales side. So we always try to converge our worlds together for the betterment of wherever we're at.
Awesome. And so super excited to dive in with you guys. Couple of housekeeping notes. Everyone has this as their question whenever they're watching an online webinar. And our answer is going to be the same. The event will be recorded, and you'll be able to access the recording as well as the key takeaways on the MSP website. At the same time, if you have any questions for the panelists, use the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to get to them during the event at any point. And so with that, let's kind of dive in. End of year, it could be either scary or not, depending on how close you are to meeting your annual objectives and your revenue targets. Can you guys tell us a little bit about how this point of the year particularly manifests itself for revenue teams? What does it mean? How should you be thinking about either addressing shortfalls, if there are any, and just kind of getting ahead of the curve, if you will?
Sure. So everyone knows the sales funnel. Most people on this call are probably heavily involved there. It looks like from our poll question, 64% of folks are actually involved in the cross-selling upselling strategy, which is great because that means you can take what you're going to learn today and apply it almost immediately. And if not, we're going to tell you how to cross the bridge with the other parts of your business to get there. However, we're in the last month of Q3, if you follow the calendar year, and whenever that time is for you, going into Q4, net new business, the top half of the funnel, does you no good. Unless your sales cycle is very transactional, which most of the time in B2B is not. So what do you have to do to bring more revenue to the table is align with your customer expansion and align with the adoption, retention, and expansion. So the last bucket there, and then just move through that cycle through and through. And it's not just the idea that we're introducing to you, but Frank has very detailed experience and has a heat map that he'd like to walk you through on some actual ideas and reframing of how to go about this.
Right. So I mentioned that in Scott and I's business, one of the units of value that we work on is the meeting. And that's not just for the sake of pitching ChronoLogic. We do think that the way to make your number is to stay busy. I mean, it's not rocket science. We know that sales activities are something that managers track. We know that organizations can look at a funnel like, hey, if I'm on the phone for 20 of my 40 hours a week, I'm going to have a much higher probability of closing the work that I need. What we've revealed, though, over these years of tracking and placing these meetings all over our customers' calendars is they go into some interesting categories. And then when we went to sort them out, a couple of things we learned were that there were motions that we put in the hot category. When I say hot, I'm talking specifically about your customer or your prospect's willingness to take this meeting versus some of the colder stuff you see on the right where you're reaching out for the first time to a prospect. You're doing things which are good things like nurture campaigns and account-based marketing. You're doing email campaigns. You're working web leads and trying to get them into a demo sequence. But I think that the takeaway here is that every one of these units has a value, and that we can kind of sort them out by what's priority to the business in terms of what we think we can get out of closing revenue, and then what gets the higher propensity to say yes. And that's related to your question, Nipul, around how do we get to fast revenue?
Right. Exactly.
So some quotes that we had to share just from customers of Chronologic. And it's not just that they're saying Chronologic helped them with their mission, although we're very proud of that fact. I think what's interesting is they said, look, we got on the platform, or we started this program, or we launched this campaign, and we had 6 weeks to do our thing. And by 4 weeks in, we actually found, strategic ways to hit our goals by prioritizing the customers who were most willing to meet with us, or by prioritizing the message that was resonating with the largest part of the customer base. And we've got examples like this all over the place, but what we brought today were really the people who were talking from a speed orientation. Instead of saying, oops, it's October, let's launch these 120-day initiatives, they had to move faster than that.
Yep. And these companies already had cross-selling, upselling as part of their core infrastructure. And so we learned a lot from them. We learned how to apply new tactics to them and went from there. So if you could kind of maybe go into some of the formatting of how these two teams are aligned, since you've worked on both account and sales cycles and managed teams on both sides, Frank.
Yes, and thank you to everyone who's here today. Please give us feedback on what is new in here, what's controversial, or what's maybe a little more obvious. I know for me, I actually started my career in market research, but I was really what I would call an account director. And then I moved over to being a consultant and a strategist. I've been in the marketing organization. Then I was in the customer success organization at larger software companies. This is the first place where I experienced this divide. In some of my smaller startups, sales and account management were the same thing. But once I got to a place that was bigger, I started looking at these workflows where in sales, our goal is to book discovery calls, build rapport, understand the business, research what they're trying to accomplish. And then we move into some really tactical stuff like negotiation and paperwork. Our dream is to close deals. It's a lot of fun. We build a process around it. We measure it, scale, repeat. But the challenge there is that after the sale, what is sales' incentive? What is sales' nature? To go look for expansions within their existing accounts. Might not be their cup of tea, or it might be something that in the training process we don't give them. In contrast, I look at the CS flow at the bottom. Now this starts when the deal is closed. We onboard our customers, we show them the love, we bring all that good knowledge that came from before the sale into alignment with their goals, getting them successful, providing training materials, getting them to adopt, getting as many people on their organization using whatever it is we sold them. But ironically, customer expansion might not be a focus in there either. So Scott, I think you've got some compare and contrasts that are going to help us operationalize this a little bit, but I think the real takeaway for me was that's what slips through the crack. Like who's on board for finding revenue in the companies we're already working with? It can really vary, organization to organization.
Yep. It seems like half of the people who took the poll have a version of that dilemma, of that core challenge that is the same on each team. And then if it is aligned and you do have that implemented, you're not necessarily training and or hiring for the skill set that enables you to do that effectively. So let's just look at the 3 stages here of ability to identify a post-sale conversation, provide the sales training, and provide the sales tools, where the sales team absolutely has the training, probably from their whole career, but at your company as well, and the tools to effectively reach out to track their touch points, understand where they're at in the post-sale funnel of expansion with each one of those folks, but they don't necessarily have all the information they need. They're not in the conversations and have the awareness to be able to insert and use those skills and use those tools in order to get to that point. Whereas the CSMs and CS team absolutely knows that. They're in those conversations every day. They do the onboarding. They're in the QBRs. They hear the goals post-sales cycle, but they're not trained salespeople. They're focused on, the NPS scores and things we'll talk about in a minute. And they typically have tools that talk more about the product than talking about how to structure those discussions. So if you have a pooled list of folks you're managing, there's no way you can just ad hoc address a pool of accounts you're covering to do cross sells. And if you have a small set of accounts, how do you actually strategically align your process so that you're not just always bringing up a cross-sell opportunity at the end of closing out a trouble ticket, or working on a QBR in which you're trying to just wrap your head around making sure they feel supported, and sometimes inserting a sales cycle there can be challenging. So let's look at the people and those KPIs that we're in charge of to show and highlight the misalignment even more. Leading KPIs for each team, you're looking at pipeline. CSM, CS, their leading indicators are the customer satisfaction and net promoter score. Would you recommend this company to another person? Revenue versus retention, both super important. A lot of times you do have some cross visibility into those numbers, but you're not bonused or attached by the hip to that other number. So maybe you should be. Certainly the leaders should be, and often that doesn't even happen. The primary activity, prospecting versus addressing customer needs, completely different. The types of people, assertive, negotiating, competitive, let's go do this. Nothing, everything rolls off their back as far as like negative downside to something they can find their way through, where you're looking for empathy and collaboration and operational excellence and data-driven decisions with, it's really a completely separate mindset. So, the secondary responsibility is the onboarding thing. Oftentimes it's a complete handoff. If not, it's just a brief mention and then you move on. And cross-selling and upselling is a secondary motion. You're worried about the NPS scores, retention, those numbers. You're not necessarily attached to a revenue number, even if that's something that you're working on. I'm catching you in the middle of a drink, Nipul. Is this something that you can relate to as you've worked through other businesses?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like the challenge that I've seen in my experience, working on the sales and marketing side, particularly, and working closely with the CS team, is kind of getting that alignment right and that handoff right. Once sales closes a deal, how do you actually hand that off to the CSM team? How do you make sure that everybody's aligned in terms of that revenue? Do you guys have any best practices that you've observed across your customers to kind of help to drive to that?
I'm glad you asked. Thank you, Frank.
Before we go there, though, I have the teeniest, tiniest little micro finding that Scott and I are really proud of, Nipul. You mentioned handoff, and then a second later you called it alignment. Teeniest, tiniest little naming exercise in our company is we totally banned the word handoff meeting, because we thought it just kind of created the wrong vibe around a salesperson going, I've done my thing, I've made my money, I can't wait to hand you this bag of money and run away. And not that people were doing that. Let's just go with like some sort of naming that's actually, hey, you're going to be on this team for the duration of our relationship with this customer. And I'm grateful to join this team. So what we're really calling it is an alignment meeting, or even like a team inauguration, because we're all on there. And so that we were really proud of it. It's the tiniest thing, but really try to ban the language around handoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like even kind of the little things like that matter, right? In my experience, bringing in the CS team, even as you're nearing the end of the sales cycle, right? So that they're brought in earlier in the process, right? Shows that, to the customer as well as internally kind of trains the organization to think as that one team. That's right. And Scott said some very hurtful things on the last slide about how these two personas are different, because I in my career, I've tried to go against that. And people say to me, hey, you're a customer success director, you're not comfortable asking for the commercial upsell. And I go, no, of course I am. They go, all right, how do you ask for it? And I say, well, I show them a results slide that shows that the software is working. And then it's very easy for me to ask for more dollars. And that's not a negotiator. That's not a persuader. That's not even somebody who can be inspirational. So I realize the gaps in my personality are, I'm comfortable asking for more, but I do it kind of empirically, whereas another personality might be more of the inspirer. So I realize Scott's actually right. We have two different ways of slicing the same thing up, and we kind of need a combo of both. So when he challenged me to put these thoughts together on what really ties us together, in my mind, it's
Everybody wants to deliver a high quality experience. Everybody is focused on the long term. And I think that's important because businesses are terrified about losing customers. But from the first day you're telling them why we are awesome and we should work together, you should really be telling them about how we're going to be working together 2 and 5 and 15 years from now, because we've got a long-term experience that we provide to you, already alluding to that post-sale team that's going to be kind of constructed around your business. And then for me, at least, this is why I decided to move into customer marketing, the two-way relationship. So instead of saying, we do all this for you, we do all this for you, we do all for this for you, we're trying to be more forthcoming and saying, and we get stuff from you. Yeah. So, like you're our customer, and together we write case studies. Together we find out what we're supposed to be building next. Like, I'm really grateful, not just for your contract, I'm grateful for your brain, because you're using what I've built in a way that's going to teach me about our future together and my future on other customers. So opening that veil up a little bit has been great for us. Just reference it as a long-term and a two-way relationship versus just getting to the first step together. And then just some tips, probably pretty obvious words here on how you do it. We target accounts where we see success first. We amplify that out to other accounts. We message using what's working on the accounts we're in, but we also try to message to our existing customer base. And we have a lot of customers who are using our platform in that way too. So there's prospecting, which can mean within an account, how do I continue to expand and get in front of new eyeballs and new seats? And another reason I'm really grateful to have commercially driven people ride with an account after the sale. And then, like I said, the stuff that really stimulates me is around customer feedback and customer metrics. They're valuable to both organizations and they're valuable back to your customers.
That's awesome. So, let's talk brass tacks, right? We talk about account expansion being a great way to help meet end of year targets. I'm sure you guys have experience or plays that you've run with customers around how to actually do that, right? So how do you actually do account expansion? So great. Can you just walk through a couple of examples?
Sure. One is if you've got 2 things to sell, kind of moving those into other departments. And we find that the sales organization is good at this in the way I just described, kind of prospecting across the organization map, figuring out your customer's hierarchy and finding new champions. How much easier and quick is that going to go if you've already got some results, with that account, or if you've already got a champion there and they're happy to make introductions to you and say, hey, you are, doing great in our EMEA division. It's time to introduce you to our Asia division. Here are the players, just kind of make them part of the team. We found that the action owner there can be sales. On something like product cross-selling, that's actually saying, how could, other SKUs benefit using what we've learned already inside of product A to move them over to product B. And then on the product upgrade notification and new product offering, kind of joking with Scott before this meeting that, those are a little more point in time when the business is ready to deliver on them. But they have been huge opportunities, like looking at Chronologic clients, because I know what they use us for. They use us when the company just announced a merger. The company just developed some new feature to what they do, or the company's got some big announcement about what they're putting out next year. That's when they reach out to the existing base and say, who wants to take a meeting about what we can do for you? So you're already using our HR product. How about our career pathing product? Seems relevant. And they target the book on who that's relevant for. They message the book in a way that's like, let me help you get more out of the platform. And then they execute. This is a great way to accelerate things. I just want to be clear. You gotta pounce when that information is hot, and you have to target the accounts where it makes sense.
So I would imagine that like technology and automation kind of plays a role here. How should folks be thinking about their tech stack and how that tech stack can be used to kind of implement this?
Yeah, thanks, Nipul. And I think that one reason to look at the tech stack to help this is because of what we talked about earlier, where the training and gaps are. So someone like Napul and Frank and myself, we're going to see through to the other side, and we're going to be able to plan and strategize and work through any internal red tape to get to that point and build the case to make it happen. However, SDRs are on the front line. CS is on the front line. CSM's a little bit more advanced, probably the actual customer success folks, but it's their first job. They typically don't know to look for these things. They're just learning. And oftentimes what would be helpful is if there were tools to be able to facilitate that. And there aren't really that many today that do this for expansion. And I'll show you visually what we have today. On the marketing side, over to sales, you have advertising tool. First, you have like ABM orchestration, intent tools, all sorts of tools that tell you which accounts to serve ads to and go after. Once they interact with those ads, who do you nurture with marketing automation? And then who do you engage with and how do you engage with them? And then they get put into your CRM as an opportunity. Once they win, you then train them with onboarding tools. You continually communicate to them and for them to their customers, both internally and externally, with additional tools that are designed for multi-channel, omni-channel communication. But then there's really nothing teed up that they can use to cross-sell and upsell. They don't have MQL scoring tools. They don't have anything to identify when there's an opportunity. You just run an independent campaign at a specific moment in time, and then you have to, if you don't already have it, breach the gap to have SDRs or an AE do the outreach for it, because there's not licenses for engagement tools over here. They just have the customer tools. So there's really a gap where something usually is just made ad hoc, or some spreadsheet formula format, whatever. You temporarily give a license to something for a minute, or maybe you're just added to a meeting per se. So there is a gap. Today, customer engagement, even sales engagement, is very manual. So you have these engagement tools coming over, and all this really does, even if you do use one of these for your customers, is it just automates that first touch point. And then it's completely manual after that. So if you're working a pooled account list, you may be able to still automate to get to that first contact, excuse me. But then you have all this manual back and forth to navigate to try and get that meeting in first after that. Lots of back and forth, and your automation disappears to get to that opportunity. So what we're saying is that the next evolution is calendar first, which we mentioned a little bit at the beginning, but you don't need to use our solution for this, though we do have we have a blueprint on how you would do this manually. But if you have a set of accounts who you know are a perfect fit for this new product, or maybe it's a product you've had for a while, you just identified that, hey, people or companies who have both of these things are infinitely more successful in accomplishing their goals, and you need to get everyone over the line to have both instead of just one or the other. The acquisition is a perfect example of creating ROI from that acquisition. So when you have that relationship already established, and you have that clear alignment of your solution to their challenging goals, it is much more effective, we're finding, to actually just send a timely and tailored meeting invite to them. A solution like ours will help you scale that, but you certainly can just work it on your own. And so what that might look like is the tailored part. Chronologic, Lauren's account review says her name. Actually, this is Jane, so a little bit of a typo there. My apologies on that. But we're talking about your account review. You could even say, utilizing XYZ platform with this feature set, or the benefit of that, or maybe a case study example that they would want to emulate. But there's familiarity there and alignment to their goal. And then you would want to either have our platform actually puts the message with it, but you would have an accompanying email following it if you're doing this manually, where you're giving that extra context into why you're reaching out and why this is a meeting that you think would be mutually beneficial. And then it's just a one-click yes. You're proposing a time into the future. And if you start doing this in your everyday life, instead of saying what time works for you, just throw a time out. That's 2 to 5, 7 days out, and just see how often people will say, yeah, actually that time does work. Or we're finding like 70 to 80% or even higher folks will accept that first time or say that time works. And then there may be just one back and forth. Another 15% of people were saying we're seeing with this tactic are having one back and forth exchange to align on that time. And it makes everybody's world more efficient. They just click yes. They know what the meeting's about. There's extra context there. It's timely, and you don't ever have to go back and forth or use a link-based scheduler, which then you have to open up 2 calendars and have someone do the work of booking for, essentially the benefit of you, and you're trying to relay that to them. And it works off of account expansion, in-product triggers, cross-department selling, merger acquisition announcements, new product announcements, or just book your QBRs this way.
Right.
You save a lot of time doing that.
If I can just slow these examples down or get them in some categories, because this took me when I first joined Chronologic. Triggering a campaign like this could be something almost firmographic, where you say, hey, we've got an offering here that's really relevant to our customers who are more than 200 employees. So let's just pull from the database based on the accounts that are more than 200 employees and only message them with this account review opportunity. But sometimes it can be product led, like I want to reach out to all the customers who have more than 10,000 records in the database, if that's your tool, or maybe all the customers who've had, a security upgrade in the past 12 months. So I want to point that out. I see categories on the left here that range from, hitting everybody who's relevant to being really thoughtful in who you reach out to.
So do you have any tips or guidance? I mean, this is great. I mean, it's kind of like the left-hand side is like the sorts of signals you should be looking for, right? In order to say, okay, this is the play that I'm going to run to help expand in this account. Do you have any tips or guidance on how you prioritize amongst these? Like, which ones should I be looking for more than the others?
That really goes back to that heat map that we were looking at. And in your own business, where do you think the best relationships are and where the biggest opportunity is?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a portfolio of products, then that's probably your angle. If you're in one part of the business, but you usually try to get into 4, 5, 6, 7 different parts of the business, maybe that's your first step. If you're launching a new product in Q4, or you do all your QBRs or maybe it's an annual business review in Q4, then that would be a good route. I would think that that's probably a little bit different for every different company.
Okay. And in terms of like in-product triggers, for example, I think so one of the folks in the audience had a question around they're for example using something like Mixpanel and SendGrid to kind of achieve those triggers. What's missing there? How is that different than kind of what you're describing here?
Yeah, so here an example is the CRM we use. We don't have like the most advanced version of marketing attribution for our campaigns, for example. One day I was exploring, more creative, better ways to do marketing attribution for a quarter where we had a lot of layered campaigns. So I'm trying to build custom reports, and I find an area where I'm like, oh, that is actually probably where I should be looking. I haven't found that part before. I click to open that menu up, and I get a notification that says, please contact a sales rep to access this attribution model part of the platform. Not gonna do that. I'm not going to do that because I just need to find a solution today, but sounds interesting. Maybe I should do that. Do I go back? Say I'm like even more driven to go back and do that. I have to remember later on, because I'm trying to solve this problem right now, to book a meeting with my sales rep, remember who my sales rep is, find them in my email, see if they have a Calendly link or something. And then it's just a process. I'm over it already. Just thinking about it, I'm over it. I'm going to find a solution. And guess what? I did. I just found a solution. However, if I click that, you know who I am because you're logged in. What if you just logged into your CRM as the company selling the solution that when this gets triggered or when this button gets clicked by this user, it automatically populates this field in Salesforce. Well, that could then trigger a calendar invite to go straight out to me and say, discovery meeting about marketing attribution module. I would accept that if it just populated on my calendar. Oh, yeah, I actually do want to know about that. Yeah, that was easy. You proposed the time worked, I click accept, and then I still can just stay focused on finding that problem for the meeting that I have this afternoon, or the update that I have this afternoon. And it was no hassle. It was one click, triggered by the platform to go out there. That would be what we're looking at.
Okay. Awesome. And so in terms of kind of the key takeaway around really shortening the sales cycle, what does this mean? Can you boil it down for us, Frank?
Do my best. So, speed and timeliness, meaningful to me. Sometimes I think fast is a little more important than perfect. But why have we sat here saying something that, might not be the most shocking, which is make sure to mine your existing relationships when you're in a hurry, to speed up the time it's going to take to message and nurture new accounts. So if I look at the customer funnel all the way down from getting them started to making lifelong relationships together, some things that are going to move quicker with an existing account, we're already under an NDA, maybe we're even under a master agreement. So paperwork is sped up. I know for us, we work with a lot of big enterprise companies. The initial sale with them, there was definitely some grunting and groaning at the tail end of the paperwork. And that can include something like IT security and InfoSec. Once you're an approved vendor, sky's the limit, right? And then if there is something to do with approving budget, contracting and all that, hopefully you know the landscape a bit better. This is an area where I don't pretend to be in sales. I'm from customer success. But if my sales partner says, actually, I know who's who over there, I know how long things take, and I know where the budget's coming from. So, we can spend all day with the procurement people, but I actually need the influence of the person who's releasing the funds. And then you have your deal champions I mentioned before. Introductions are great, so's influence. If I can run around in the process of talking to a new segment of an existing account and say, don't take my word from it, talk to Nipul, he's already using the thing. Things move really rapidly in our experience.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
So just some final thoughts. Thank you so much for everybody for coming. And we'll leave at the end on, how to stay in touch. Really grateful for the questions in the chat, that Q&A one. I hope I was helpful there, Jennifer. But just a thought about a question that we get, which is like, does this work on every kind of business? Now, we don't have, full saturation yet, but we're working with pretty big and pretty small sales teams. So the ability to scale out to like 200 reps, to me, the magic there is we are dishing out opportunities faster than a manager could, faster than we could expect people to build out their own schedules, and with a more orderly approach. And we've got an example where a really big team had a pretty good week where 800 meetings were accepted and executed. So think about what you sell, think about your your funnel metrics. 800 meetings is going to lead to something good. But then we've also got an example where we had 6 reps who were in the field, and they had a great week where 150 meetings fell to the calendar. So you can see how there's like a gigantic and an SMB kind of version of this, depending on team size.
Yep, exactly. It really, some folks see some big logos and they're like, hey, this must be just for high volume. It's actually not. It's effective even in your day-to-day life, with just like scheduling a meeting with a coworker or something, or with a partner that you work with. But it certainly can scale to the likes of which you didn't necessarily think this would be a tactic you could use. We do have some great Q&A here. One of them is actually a really difficult question to answer concisely. So we'll get to that one next. I think the first one I'll look at here is what's the percentage of success that you have on unsolicited meeting proposals? I think that the key here is to dissect the unsolicited. Now, we don't want you to reach out to folks completely unsolicited, there should be some kind of action that takes place that is a significant moment that they either triggered with a response or an inbound motion, or that they are bluntly aware of and have an expectation set there, like a QBR. You've been doing them and you're trying to make it more efficient to get through all the accounts that you're trying to go after. Instead of starting a "when would you like to meet" conversation, please click this link, and then you're putting a lot of onus on them, you can just get to a place of being on the same page much faster. But in terms of the in product, that's a trigger. In terms of the they download a case study that talks about something that they don't have yet on their platform. If you have multiple SKUs, or maybe someone creates an action or attends a webinar or talks to someone in a virtual booth or in an in-person booth when that comes back, where they're from the same company from a different division. And it's those interactions where you're normally having a CSM proactively reach out with emails and calls that you would actually use this instead. Use the same triggers you're using today to drive more business, but just use this as the first course of action. If you get a no, you'll typically know why you get the no, because they'll say, and then you can build off of that to try and turn it into a yes, or let it be. And if there's no response, then you can go back to your traditional tactics, but you're going to get the yeses a lot quicker. You're going to get the no's out of the way a lot faster. And you'll just, from that volume alone, be much better off. And if you want to still go through some motions that you're used to after that, you're going to be much more strategic in doing so. So I think that the unsolicited is a little bit skewed one way than how we are suggesting this. And the percentage of success, depending on the lead source, we're typically seeing 2 to 4 times X the conversion rate you're typically seeing. When you have a customer campaign, it can range, our customers have ranged from like 60% conversion rate to an 80% conversion rate, depending on how strategic you are and how specific your starting point audience is, to at least have that call to discuss future actions. Anything you would add to that, Frank?
No, I think that's it. You know, in the Q&A, I said something like, thanks, Scott, actually, for clarifying, you know, freezing cold is never the way, right? But what I shared was that we do see a pretty big variance based on the situation. And we've been able to link that data to a little bit the message and a little bit the trigger. So the point is, if you understand your business, you might be delighted with a 2% accept rate because you put 20,000 leads through, got a lot of meetings. And then you might say, you know, 60% is good enough. I'm trying to get 66 because it's a smaller book of higher value meetings. So
yep. We have 2 questions relating to just starting a role. So one is just starting a new customer marketing role. How do you bridge the gap between CS and the sales revenue team? Because essentially you are that conductor. And Frank, I'll let you kind of address that because that's literally the spot you live today for us.
I was just finishing typing my answer there, so I will hit send so that everybody can have a look. But yeah, I said this one really hits close to home. I've been in this seat for about 5 months. And just off the top of my head, Scott, maybe you can help, you know, refresh my memory, because we do work on a lot of different little things. But you asked where we decided to put the emphasis first. You know, there was a lot of great customer examples kicking around the organization. It was my job to wrangle that, to format it, to sort of road test it, and empower the field with it. So, you know, I had the tribal knowledge of, yeah, this customer got a great accept rate. This other customer drove all this revenue. These guys are really happy. They've adopted like crazy. They have 1,000 users. Just putting that in a format where everybody can pull them off the shelf and run to meetings with them was like one of my big first initiatives. The other is creating an experts program where we educate and empower and reward and certify client contacts who are killing it on Chronologic. And when I invite them to that, I tell them this is as much for us as it is for you. Just like I said earlier, this is a two-way relationship. We want to make you an expert so that you have success on the platform, you get a promotion, you put it on your LinkedIn, your name is associated with innovation at the place you work at. But we also need your help in what we're building. We need your help in what's working. And I'm creating this community that meets, periodically, and also can, chat to each other on Slack and LinkedIn, to just sort out questions among themselves where I don't necessarily have to be in the conversation. So we thought the community piece, as soon as possible, would be the second emphasis. And then I mentioned the third thing. I'm still down in deals. I don't think I'm getting away from it anytime soon. I'm grateful when I get a chance to help sales, and they help me, because I get the word on the streets. I keep the muscles limber on how we're communicating. And, my passion is that we communicate as a sales and revenue and CS organization in the language that our customers communicate back to us. So trying to keep that channel open so that I can work on our messaging in the same way that our customers talk about it.
Yep. The communication and collaboration, I think, were the two things I took away. Not really doing a full-blown case study, just talking to customers, listening to customers, and grabbing enough information for a success recipe slide, and librarying and indexing them. The second thing you said was the creating that community. If you don't have one, you should be involved in it, or create it. If you don't have one, create it. If you have one, get involved in it. And then the last thing is get involved in the QBR calls and get involved in the sales cycle calls, both. You're going to learn way more, way faster, and the new information faster that way. And that's that communication part. We're even still evolving those items, and Frank's doing a fantastic job of that. For the other side, where they're starting an account management team and a customer success team from scratch, that is a build out of a sales team. Our goal is to increase cross-selling, upselling, and help customers get into one more platform. What's your advice on creating that? Frank, do you have some initial thoughts for that as well?
I do. And I'm just going to be a little bit bold here and say you might be up against a cultural issue. I don't know if you are, but let's just check. What are two really cool business books you can pull down, or grab someone's post from a company like Churn Zero or Gainsight? Some of these companies that are really, really championing the purpose of customer success, or just talking heads who are out there. And do you have a chance to put that in front of your CRO and say, look, this is a trend in business right now. We think that the account team is as important or more, right, than the top line team. And I'm not just making this stuff up. It's out here on the internet. I'm suggesting that, Maggie. I could be totally wrong. I could be tripping, but I think that you might be up against something cultural if you're just building that process. And there are some some scare tactics out there too. Like I've seen sound bites where a person says, our biggest mistake was we didn't build customer success early enough. Standing up a divorce prevention department at the last minute is not considered a best practice. And then with the goal to increase upsell and cross-selling, I might say this. Since you're a startup, and it wasn't too long ago, we used to label ourselves that way. We're still like kind of a growth company. I wonder what you can get out of cross-pollination and doing a little bit of undercover CEO, where you're asking the sales team to double as customer success or to advise your playbook or any of that stuff. Because I think that if you've experienced both, you end up being the strongest practitioner. So those are just the ones off the top of my head, Scott. I don't know if you would add anything maybe a little less conceptual.
I would add one thing to that. I like choosing a chapter out of a book and you read the full thing. I like the easier version of that, which is grab a blog post from an expert in this, like you mentioned, Churn Zero and Gainsight, and there's many others, Client Success, the list goes on. Not biased towards any of them. They all have great content, but grab that. The other thing is to couple with that, don't underestimate the power of your own data to create cultural change within your unique environment. That data may not live yet. You may need to go curate that data on your own. Oftentimes, it's very difficult to take the customer data, which weirdly enough, I've run into this many times, the customer who's a customer lives in finance. The usage and seats, or however you sell your platform, lives in a separate platform, and then the contacts or overall scope of the account lives in the CRM. You may have to be the one to pull that data together so you can get some help from the ops team, and then create some metrics and stories with those metrics that help drive the change. Like if everyone says, oh, XYZ is our biggest account. Well, what if you discover that that account started and ended and grows with a account expansion story that you're trying to evolve, and then all of a sudden you find 10 other current customers that are like that. And now all of a sudden you can get marketing and sales and CS working together on that specific thing to replicate something that they've already bought into and loved. They just didn't hear the story in that light. I would say that that's maybe the secondary component to that.
Awesome. So we're nearing the bottom of the hour here. But before we wrap up, I wanted to give you guys kind of the chance to, if you had any like top 1, 2, 3 takeaways for the audience, tweetable moments, if you will, that the audience can, that you can leave the audience with.
I think that the thing I just ended with, where you're taking stories from thought leaders that you can find out in the world from the experts in just that one topic, applying your own data, communicating that, and then being the coordinator of that. Nothing's going to get done unless you do it, and don't think that it's going to take, oh, I have to get all 3 of these business leaders to be on board. Like, it probably will, but you're going to have to be the one to individually talk to them, talk through it with them one-on-one, talk through it with them as a group after you've had one-on-one conversations. Be that conductor and that communicator, especially if it's a new role or it's a role that you know more can be done with.
Awesome. Frank?
I would just say move swiftly and carefully with targeting, and great feedback from the group on like, hey, what if this hits wrong? Well, maybe it was targeted wrong, or maybe it was a messaging issue. But usually if you've got some great clients, the evidence should be in there to help you target and reach out to the correct ones.
Awesome. Awesome. Great advice indeed. And so we're going to wrap things up here. Thank everyone for attending. Loved having you all here. Especially thanks to you, Frank, and to you, Scott, from the Chronologic team. You guys are doing some awesome stuff, and I would encourage the audience to really check you guys out. And for everyone in the audience, the recordings and the takeaways, they'll be available on the MSP site shortly. And so with that, stay safe, and we'll see you the next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thanks, MSP.